So at this point, what we have is a situation where we've got the base inflation that's locked in, that's coming. The bottlenecks are here. That's going to put upward pressure on prices. And we've got money supply where there's just been so much pumped into the system that some of it will get into the wallets of people and they will spend it right away, but they won't spend it all. Some they may just hold as cash, sort of a back reserve. Some may pay off debt. Some may put it into investment instruments. But if they see the inflation heating up because of the first three factors, because of the base, because of the bottleneck inflation, and because of what's trickling out because of the money supply inflation, then you could see a whole new level of inflation. So now I'm conservatively saying 3%. I think we're going to get to 5% on the annualized basis, but the potential could exist for a 10% inflation. I'm not predicting that, but it's not out of the question. Things are going to really heat up. There's going to be inflation like we haven't seen in at least since the 1970s.
When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Jose Prado of Man-Made Survival, and I'm so glad to finally be back here with you, bringing you the news, bringing you the analysis, and see how everything comes together and everything is related to preparedness. Because, you know, I've been gone for 2 months because, as you know, my dad got ill, and that, you know, pretty much took me away from everything to be with him in the hospital. And, you know, a lot of things have been happening ever since, you know, the last time I made a podcast. And the most recent one that has happened is the hack of the pipeline. And now today, as I'm recording this podcast, now they're talking about a hack with the meat packaging place. So those events really put the final nail in the coffin that proves that preparedness should be part of the American society. And, you know, what I want to do with this community of preppers is that I want to make sure that it becomes part of the culture, you know, to the heart of it. Because every time something like this happens, people panic. You know, we saw it with the pandemic. We saw it with the food shortages. We saw what happened in Texas. Now what happened with the gas station. And now that this news is out with the meat, we're going to see how people are going to react to it. But what happened with the gas stations and the gas being out really proved that people do not, since they don't understand preparedness, they'll do whatever it takes for them to feel safe. And they'll do things that are not recommended, such as using whatever container they can find, such as plastic bags and other things that are not approved for gasoline, and just use it because, you know, they just don't know any better. We saw the exact same thing when the pandemic first broke out. You know, first we saw it in other places, in other countries, and people were laughing that people in Asia were using, you know, feminine pads. They were using oranges. They were using plastic bottles. You know, they were using all these things. And then when the pandemic came to America, people were pretty much doing the same thing. And now that this pipeline got hacked, you know, last month, people were using plastic bags, you know, totes, whatever they can find. And there was one accident that I saw where a person that had just left the gas station had used unapproved gas containers, and their car caught on fire. So preparedness is essential for everyday life, for everybody all throughout the country, because when something like this happens, you have to know exactly what to do. This is the reason why I say that preparedness should not be about someone's opinion. And everything that has been happening proves that. It's proving that right now. And that's why here in this podcast, I teach you, you know, the foundations of preparedness, science-backed. Everything that we do for preparedness has a scientific reason why we do it. And that's exactly what we're going to be getting, you know, in this podcast today. And as you know, the way that I do podcasts is that I have all this information that I got to give you. For me, it's one long podcast. For you, it's going to be divided into different episodes. So I encourage you to stay all the way to the end, listen to all this information, but most importantly, to actually act on it instead of, you know, just gathering information and not doing anything about it. Because, you know, it's not going to do you any good if you know what's happening, but you don't do anything about it. All right, so before I continue with everything, I do want to mention And I do want to say thank you to everybody that sent me messages asking about my dad, how he was doing, how I was doing, when I was going to come back, because you guys missed my analysis and the detailed podcast that I give you with all this information. And, I really do appreciate each and every one of you who sent me those messages and asked how we were doing. And thankfully, my dad is doing a lot better now. We're back at home, and he should be recovering, to a full cure now. So I really do want to thank the medical community. I want to thank the doctors, the nurses, the hospital that took care of my dad. I do want to say that, that goes to show even more that the current medical system is very necessary for American life. It's one of the four parts of the supply chain, as I describe it in this podcast, which is food, water, power, and the medical system. And even though, there's some grievances and stuff like that some people feel towards it because of the prices and everything else, it proved to me at least one more time that although, it's not a perfect system, it is there. And because of it, a lot more people are alive thanks to it, rather than if it wasn't there, a lot more people would be dead. And that's the report that I gave you when I did the EMP podcast, months ago. So again, I want to thank everybody, from doctors to nurses to the hospital to the community of preppers who asked how we were doing. All right, so before I get into the podcast, I also want to mention something. In the 2 months that I was out, I didn't just sit there and lost time. I finished the book that I had been starting writing since last year. I finally had all the time in the world to finish it, and it's not finally complete. We're at the last stage now where we have to get, a cover for it. We have to get somebody to professionally do the audiobook. We got to get it printed, and, all the other things that are involved in all of that. And I will let you guys know once we have all of that finished, and I will let you know how much it's going to cost. And I would really appreciate it if you can consider buying the book to support this podcast. I really do think that this book is gonna help you. It's gonna set the foundations as I've been teaching them here, and it's gonna help each and every one of you create your alliance. Stocking up and knowing why you do the things you do. So I'll let you know when that comes out, and I'll do the announcement for the title and everything else. All right, so let's talk about the economy, because there's a lot of things that have been going on for a while now, but as we have been thinking about this for a while, we're wondering, right? I brought this issue up here in the podcast saying, how much longer can we go adding to the debt before it collapses on us? And, a lot of people think that we can go beyond $100 trillion on the national debt, not the unfunded liabilities. Other people think that it could happen at any minute. And with what we're seeing with the price inflation, with the CPI, it really kind of points towards that. All right. And that's what I want to focus on this podcast, or at least in this particular, that's going to be divided, because really what I want to talk about is the economy, the shortages, and the weather, because all of those three things are interconnected. And if you can follow along and put all this together, you can see the bigger picture, and you're going to see where it's going to take you to, because there's some things that even though we're experiencing some of it now, the real effects of it will be on later. That's the reason why you have to make sure that you're prepared right now, and you put everything in place, so when those things actually do happen, all right, you're better off from that point on. And, one of the things that I've always told you here, and that I wrote in the book, is that preparedness can no longer be the one event that you're waiting for to happen. It unfolds for several weeks or months, and then things go back to normal. History proves that that's not what happens, at least not with the significant, real crap and hit the fan scenarios that we should all prepare for. Because, a natural disaster will happen. A tornado can come through your house, a hurricane or something like that can come through your house. It can destroy it, but that didn't mean that the entire country was affected. Now, with this that I'm going to be talking about today, it will affect not just you locally, but nationwide, and even beyond the United States, because these are issues that we're seeing globally. And once the dominoes start falling, then when they all come together, they're going to create this big problem for everyone. So that is the reason why you have to take advantage of each day that you have to prepare. And people break down into two groups: people who have a lot of money, or some money to where they can use preparedness and not really affect the pocketbook, and people who don't have much money and they have to take the baby steps. If you're in the group of people who have enough money to where you can prepare on a regular basis without really affecting you very much, then you need to stop procrastinating. You need to see what you have lacking and get it now, because we don't know how much longer it's going to be before the supply chain problems get a lot bigger, or everything gets so expensive that it becomes a lot more difficult to get. And for the people who do not have much money and you're taking those baby steps, I encourage you to continue to take those baby steps, because you can only prepare as so much as you can, and until the day something happens. Beyond that, you have to adjust your way of life and live beyond that. So let's look at what we need. Let's see what we're lacking, and from that moment on, let's move on to something that we need. Don't just focus on the one thing. Don't just focus on stocking food if you don't have any seeds, if you don't have any livestock. Don't focus on stocking up bottles of water if you don't have a rain catchment system, or you don't have a river going through, or a creek, a river, whatever, body of water running through your property. There's different things that you can do, different steps that you can take, and hopefully we have a lot more time before these issues that I'm going to be talking about, fully manifest, and that way you have a lot more time to prepare. But just know that they're coming, and as I'm going to be proving them to you, they're just around the corner. Now, I do want to mention, and I do want to make it clear, I'm not trying to be an alarmist or anything like that, because the Fed, the White House, the powers that be, they're going to prolong the collapse of the dollar and everything else as much as they can, because they have proven to do it. There are theories out there that say that they're trying their best to destroy us or whatever. But what they have been doing, and as I've been showing it to you here, is that they're trying to prolong it as much as they can. Because as you know, the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, they told the other countries, the other central banks, they told them, print as much money as you can, because otherwise all this is going to collapse. And although printing more money will make the collapse even worse, they just, they're trying to prolong it as much as they can. Maybe they don't have all the things that they need ready for them, and they're trying to prolong that, or maybe they just don't want the system to fall apart. We don't know. The point is that we're getting time because they're creating time for themselves. So we have to take advantage of that right now. All right. So the money printing right now, supposedly, right? The what you would call it, the official number for the inflation that we have, or actually the debt that we have here in the country, is supposed to be $28.3 trillion. But that does not include the stimulus package that was passed, when was it? I think February, the almost $2 trillion, and then the one in December that was also $2.4 trillion, I think, if I'm not mistaken. My point is that those are not added to it. I don't know where they go. I don't understand why they're not being added to it, but the debt should really be about $33 trillion. So how much longer can it go? No idea. Maybe they can go to 100 trillion, 200 trillion, maybe a quadrillion. But the point is that it's going to collapse one day, and it looks like the foundation is crumbling right now. So what the Fed does is that they print all this money, right? They create out of thin air, and then they give it to the U.S. government through treasuries, which is what this article is going to describe. Now, pay close attention, because there's another detail here in this article that I had not really thought about until I read it. And then, it kind of clicked on me, and I'm going to share this with you in just a second. So the article comes from the economicprism.com, and the title says, "The Ugly Truth About Printing Press Money. Weeping and gnashing of teeth shall come. We don't know when exactly, but we do know a certain catastrophe is approaching. In fact, we can see it on the horizon. Does anyone in Washington give a rip the nation's beyond broke? Does anybody in Congress care that outright money printing is what's financing their stimulus bills? Does House Financial Service Committee Chair Maxine Waters think it's all a real hoot? The majority of the electorate have voted for generous gifts from the public treasury. They want free education, free food, free phones, free transportation, and free drugs. They want debt forgiveness. Most of all, they want free money. The Federal Reserve adds a notation to its balance sheet, now over $7.7 trillion. And the credit magically appears from thin air. The Fed then loans the freshly minted credit to the Treasury through the purchase of Treasury notes. The Treasury then directs this printing press money into Washington's various spending programs. This inflation of the money supply is inflation in its true sense, and it comes with disruptive consequences. After asset prices inflation and wild gambling and speculation comes consumer price inflation, the real wealth destroyer. This is the ugly truth about printing press money. The ugly truth Fed Chair Powell and Treasury Secretary Yellen will never share as they champion their virtues of their policies of mass inflation. Weeping and gnashing of teeth shall come. All right, so the very important thing that I got from this article when I first read it was the Fed's balance sheet that is at $7.7 trillion. And when I looked it up and did a little research, what I found out is that the Fed is the central bank of the United States, right? Almost every country has a central bank to its name. And they're the ones that create the money. You know, they lend it to the government, and then they're supposed to use that to pay the bills and to create more revenues to pay it back. But what has happened here is that the Fed has been printing all this money for a very long time. Now, $7.7 trillion, it's a lot of money. But compared to the 28 or technically $33 trillion balance sheet that the United States has, or, the debt, there's a big difference between the two. Now, this is what kind of dawned on me when I was thinking about this. What if our national debt doesn't matter as much as the Fed's balance sheet? Because if the balance sheet of the Fed is being increased according to how much money we need to borrow from them to spend, then the real crisis will come from the Fed Reserve, because then it'll come to a point where they cannot just simply print money. Maybe they have gold that they can back up their balance sheet. Maybe they don't. But the point is that it's going to get to one point where they're going to eventually say, we cannot do this anymore. You're going to have to pay us back. And then the U.S. government is going to be forced to pay back somehow, not with printed money. It's going to have to be real assets. So when the U.S. government is forced to come to that point and they say, okay, we have to, we have to give something to the Fed. Otherwise, we're going to default. So what are the first things that we're going to cut? And of course, every single time it's going to be the people who are affected. It's going to be the people who are dependent on the government who are going to be affected. Okay, so this right here is the reason why I really do believe that we have to come in and step up as community leaders, because we know how preparedness is. We know what it is. We're prepared for something like this to happen. And when the time comes, people are going to be looking for help. They're going to be looking for food. They're going to be looking for water. They're going to be looking for housing, for other things that they are dependent on the government on. What we can provide is help for them to help themselves. So, the one thing that has always been part of the prepper community is selfishness, where people, in podcasts and other people that you've seen on the internet, they say, I prepare, you didn't go away. If you try to come to me for help, and I'm going to turn you away because you didn't prepare. And if you insist, I'm going to shoot you in the face. Well, that is exactly the thing that I want to get rid of in this community of preppers, because we have enough time. We are seeing what's happening in the news. We're getting the analysis of what's happening. We have the foresight, and we are not blinded to really be so dependent on the supply chain and the grid, right? So if we're taking the proper steps, with a real foundation to where we're going to be okay. We're going to have a self-sustained system where we're going to have abundance. We're going to be able to help other people through churches and organizations and stuff like that. Then we turn those people from being part of the problem to actually being part of the solution. Because now they don't have to worry so much about where the next meal is coming from. They don't have to worry about so much about what they're going to feed their kids. They're going to be able to focus on other social issues that we're going to have in those days, and we can work together to make it better. That is the reason why I really do believe we have to come together as a community of preppers, unify, and become leaders in our community. All right. So, with the whole money printing, I have an article here, and actually it's a little piece that I put on this part, and then the same article is going to be used on the second part of this podcast. And the reason that I did that is because the first part goes along with what I'm reading to you right now and what I'm saying. This comes from tongluongo.me, and the article's title is From the Notebook: The Digital Yuan, Proof of Guns, and the Expiration of Money. Martin Armstrong makes the point all the time that the main reason why the US dollar is the world's reserve currency is because it is the only modern government issued currency that hasn't been defaulted on in over 200 years. So simply put, what Tom Longo is saying is that people have a lot of, what would you call it? They have a lot of confidence in the US dollar because in all the time that it's been around, it has never defaulted, you know, such as like the German currency, or, you know, Venezuelan currency, Zimbabwe's currency, other currencies. And yes, even though after World War II, we put ourselves in a position where we were the world reserve currency and everybody's using dollars, with all the money printing that we're doing, then eventually it's going to be to where people start losing their confidence. Okay, so if people lose their confidence on the US dollar, they're going to start dropping, and they're going to start looking for other places to go because the US dollar is no longer, you know, beneficial, because what we're doing with all this money printing, with all these social nets or social safety nets, we're devaluing the worth of the dollar. Is buying a lot less, and that's exactly what we're seeing with the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index. What really that translates to is what you're spending in the grocery stores, what are you spending in gasoline and other things, you know, on rents and stuff like that. When all those prices start to go up, that's when people pay attention and start freaking out. Because if you're really paying attention to the news, to the mainstream media, alternative media, to the White House, and even the Fed, now everybody is talking about inflation. And inflation has been something that I've been talking about in this podcast for a very long time, because really what I've been doing is that I have fast forward to the time when we hit hyperinflation, because from that point on, the country is going to be completely different. Okay, there's going to be shortages of food. There's going to be shortages of water. There's going to be shortages of goods and services. And not because, well, it could also be, but not so much because the farmers can't get it done, but because it's going to be so expensive, nobody can buy anything. And then eventually it gets so expensive for the farmers that they cannot produce anything either. That's exactly what happened in Venezuela. That's exactly what happened in other places. When the hyperinflation hit and the farmers can no longer use the fuel to, you know, power the tractors and be able to mass produce food, then all of that started affecting the supply chain everywhere else within the country. All right, so the U.S. does import a lot of goods, although we do create a lot of the stuff as well, you know, as far as farmers go. But what happens, which is really, you know, not very smart, at least in my opinion, is that we grow the food here, right? Let's just say corn, just for as an example. We'll get the corn, and then we'll grow it, we'll ship it to China so they can process it, can it, and then bring it back to the United States to be sold. That right there is going to cost a lot of money in the future, to where we're going to have to spend a lot more money to pay the Chinese and then pay to get it back. Okay, so all of that is going to really make everybody suffer, especially on the lower rungs of the economic ladder, because, you know, rich people will always have the opportunity to just go. They have assets. You know, assets are the physical things that they own. They own gold, silver, property, you know, buildings. They own all these physical things, and they can very easily sell them and then take their riches and go overseas. And that is something that we saw when the pandemic first happened. There was a very long list of CEOs that pretty much fled the United States and they went to Switzerland. So that says the precedent that when things like this happen, they're just going to flee and they're going to go to their safe spot. Something that most of us don't have the luxury of doing. So what we have to do is that we have to prepare ourselves right now for when crap hits the fan. We are able to live each and every single day. Again, we're not waiting for that one event to happen and then life goes back to normal. No, what we're doing, we're preparing to change our lifestyle completely. And an economic collapse will cause that, all right? So I have a video for you. And this is the most successful investor ever, Billionaire Stan Druckenmiller. And I got this video from Zero Hedge, and the title of the article where that video is in is The Secret is Out. And pay close attention to what this billionaire is saying, because at the end of the video, it gives you the clues or who's going to be affected the most and why. All right, here's that video.
But let's start with the Fed and inequality. I don't think there has been any greater engine of inequality than the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States the last 11 years. So hearing the chairman talk about visiting homeless shelters is very, very rich indeed. I just had the best year I've had in 15 years last year. Everyone wealthy I know is making a fortune. And why are we making it? Because this guy is printing money like there's no tomorrow. And the kids in Harlem, in my opinion, are not benefiting from money printing, but Stan Druckenmiller and other wealthy people are. So for the life of me, I can't figure out why the left is so excited about money printing when all the data says the people that benefit from money printing are rich people that know how to navigate the markets. The odds-on bet is we're going to have inflation, and inflation is going to hurt poor people again a lot more than rich people. How does this thing end? To me, the asset bubble, which he's blowing up into unbelievable proportions, busts before the inflation ever really manifests itself. That's what happened with the housing thing in 08, 09. We never really got to the inflation because the asset bubble burst. Not dissimilar to what happened in 29. That's not my central case, but let me just say, we've never had a deflationary bust because inflation was too close to zero or 1.5 instead of 2. We've had them because we've had these tremendous asset bubbles. It happened here in 29. It happened in Japan in 90. And obviously it happened in the great financial crisis. And there is no group that will get hurt more by a bust than the poor. They will be first in line to get screwed. Trust me.
All right, so his video is very important because he points out different things. The very first thing is that he's talking about the Fed. And, you know, right now the Fed is a bit of focus here, but we're going to be shifting a bit. The reason they're in focus is because they're the ones that are printing all this money. They're the ones who are devaluing the dollar. All right, so what you're seeing in front of you right now is a little picture. All right, for the people who are listening to this on the podcast, this is kind of a diagram of the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar. And you have a timeline here, and you know the graph shows how the purchasing power of the dollar peaked, then goes down, picks again, and then it has been steadily falling since pretty much 1930s. And when the Fed first was created back in 1913, you could actually buy 30 Hershey chocolate bars just with $1. But if you fast forward to 2021, the only thing you can buy with $1 is a McDonald's coffee. And you for the people who are able to see this on the video, you are seeing right there all the different items that you used to be able to buy with just $1. All right. So, oh yeah, and the prices on top of it, it shows you how much it costs to buy the same items, for the dollars today. So that is really important. So if the Fed is going to print all this money, they're creating the inequality in that the rich people have the assets, they have the resources, they have the experts that they can go to, pay all this money to, and say, all right, I need you to tell me where I need to put my money so it can grow. That's the reason why through the pandemic, we saw, more billionaires being made, more millionaires being made. We saw that the people who are already in the 1%, their riches got a lot bigger. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going by memory here, the combined wealth of rich people, I don't remember correctly if it was from around the world, just the United States, but it was something like they went from owning $7 trillion together collectively to over 15. That's how much their wealth grew through the pandemic. And yes, you can say the government was involved and they did all this. Yeah, sure. But what I'm saying is that the people who were, laid off through the pandemic, they didn't make any wealth. Actually, people were being evicted. People were making miles and miles longs worth of line just to try to get something from the food bank. People were going at 2 a.m. trying to be the first ones there just to find out that there were already people there waiting before they even got there. All right, so these are the people who are affected the most. The rich people don't worry about it, right? They just take their assets, they go somewhere else. They convert it into gold, they convert it into property. That is the reason why they stay rich. For us, that we don't have the ability to buy those kind of assets, we have preparedness in our corner, because we can prepare for when this collapses, then we won't be affected as much. So at the end of that video, as you heard him, he said that the pretty much the working class are the ones who are going to be affected the most. But let's just put preparedness into that. If you already have your home, right? Because preparedness needs to be done the proper way. Yes, you may live in an apartment, but if you work yourself to where you actually can own a home or a piece of property, you can turn that into something that is going to be self-sustained. And it does have to have a minimum of acreage. It has to have all these things, because that's just going to work in your favor, and it's going to be better off for you. So what I teach you here, you need to have at least 5 to 10 acres. And the reason is because you're planning on having all this big garden, all these fruit trees and nut trees, all this livestock, and the chicken coops and everything that they go in. You building a home, and if you cannot build a home, then you can put a mini home there for you and your entire alliance. So you're gonna need space. That is the reason why you need at least 5 to 10 acres. And when you talk about security, if people try to come through, let's just remember what happened with Antifa and Black Lives Matter last summer. When they went to the suburbs, they were able to just stand feet away from people's front door and, throw things, break windows, do all this other stuff that they did. If you have 5 acres between the road and your house, then it's gonna be a lot easier to protect your property. That is the reason why you want that bug allocation in your house. You move out of the apartment into a home, and you want to look for those type of things when it comes to your preparedness. Now, if you're taking those baby steps right now, it's going to help you on later on. We don't know when this is going to collapse. We just know it's going to happen. All right. And rich people are starting to mention it because they're freaking out about the small percentage that everything has been inflated. Okay. So putting it into perspective, this past week, Joe Biden proposed $6 trillion budget for 2022, for fiscal year 2022. Now, Donald Trump, he set the budget, for October 2020 through October 2021. Now that Joe Biden's in the office, it's his turn to do the budget for October 2021 through October 2022. In that 1 year span, in those 12 months, he has proposed to spend $6 trillion. And the reason that is just insane is because our revenue, the U.S. Treasury revenue, is only $3 trillion. So where are we going to get the other 3? It's going to be printed. And that's given the fact that, it might be more that gets printed because we have all these other things that we're taking care of as a country. So now that you know this information about the Fed and the balance sheet, and all these things that have been happening, what do you think is going to do to the consumer price index? It's going to make it explode even more. All right. So I have a video from Peter Schiff where he talks about how the CPI has exploded and where it could actually take us a year from now. All right. Here's that video.
Now, the key is, though, looking at what's already happened so far this year. If you take the first 4 months of the year, consumer prices are already up by 2%. That is the Fed's goal, right? Their target of 2% a year inflation. And we've already hit the entire target in the first 1/3 of the year. Now, if you assume that the rest of the year is identical to the first 4 months, we just repeat the same numbers for the next 2 4-month periods, inflation for the entire year will come in at 6%. Which is well above anything that the Fed should be able to consider acceptable when they're claiming with a straight face that their target is for inflation to average 2%. Obviously, nobody believes that we're going to get a repeat of the last 4 months over the next 2 4-month periods. But if you look at the numbers, why would you assume that the trend that's already in motion isn't going to stay in motion? If the current trend stays and every month we get a 0.2% increase, right? We were 0.4 in February, 0.6 in March, 0.8 in April. Maybe May prices will rise by a full percent. If we continue this acceleration from now through the end of the year, 2021, the CPI will increase by better than 20% for the year. Now, I don't think that this curve is going to continue to accelerate at the same pace. So I would bet that the CPI is not going to be 20% for 2021, although it is possible. But I do think that we're going to end up north of 10%. So I think we're going to continue to pick up speed when it comes to inflation, albeit it may be at a somewhat slower rate than what we've experienced in the acceleration over the past few months. But I expect many more months throughout the year where we will have monthly increases that are higher than the 0.8% increase that just broke that record all the way back to 1981.
All right, so very important clues in what Peter Schiff said in that clip, because right now, if we continue the same pace that we're doing, we're gonna end up, over 20% inflation. He thinks he might adjust, between in the teens, right? That's what pretty much he's saying. So, just think, if right now the inflation, the official inflation that we're seeing is only 6%. And the White House is paying attention, the Fed is paying attention, the markets are paying attention, and everyday people are starting to pay attention. Imagine what's it going to look like when it's north of 10, north of 20, north of 30, and north of 40, right before 50, before it becomes hyperinflation. Now, this is what hyperinflation is. Hyperinflation, according to Investopedia.com, is a term to describe rapid, excessive, and out-of-control general price increases in an economy. While inflation is a measure of the pace of rising prices for goods and services, hyperinflation is rapidly rising inflation, typically measuring more than 50% per month. So meaning that once you hit the 50% threshold, really, things get out of control just very, very fast because people start to panic a lot more. And that's just everyday people. They'll freak out. But the people who are investing all this money in the markets, the government, and all these other places, they're just going to freak completely out. They're going to leave the country. They're going to take their money, cut their losses and go somewhere else. That's going to create the hyperinflation that we're all waiting for. Because once all these people who are panicking, all these creditors and everything else, they flee to, let's say, China, as I'm going to be showing here in just a minute. Once they flee to China, they're going to come back, or, all those dollars are going to come back. They're going to hit the economy, and then we're going to see an even bigger explosion because we are the one nation in the world that has ever gathered this type of debt. And imagine if Venezuela and Zimbabwe and others, they had very, very high inflation, unimaginable inflation with $115 billion in debt. What are we going to look like with 40, 50, 60, 70 trillion dollars in debt? That's not counting the unfunded liabilities, because if you count us right now, we're over $130 trillion in debt. So it's going to create a lot of panic. That is the reason why you have to make sure that you prepare for your lifestyle to change from that point forward. Now, I do want to make this point that I wrote down, and it was kind of like a note that I made to myself. If 3 to 4% inflation scares the markets and the government, then what will 10 to 40% do? Not just for the markets and the government, but also for your pocket. All right, so what I'm going to be showing you here in just a second is a picture. And for the people who are listening to the podcast, this is what it says. Lebanon, what can you buy with 10,000 Lebanese pounds? A compounding economic crisis has caused food prices to soar, leaving many unable to buy basic items. Now, what you're seeing in the screen and what I'm going to be describing here is 3 different years, 2019, 2020, and 2021. In 2019 in Lebanon, with 10,000 pounds, you could buy milk, tomatoes, oranges, apples, cucumbers, rice, and chicken. In 2020, once the inflation started going up, now you are able to buy milk, tomatoes, and oranges. Now in 2021, since the inflation has gotten so bad, now you can only buy milk. All right, so the reason that I wanted to show you this is because it really paints a picture of what we're going to be seeing here in the United States. And in some cases, we're already seeing that. All right, but I do want to point this out, which is really important, and it should really make you think even more towards you being able to resupply yourself when, preparing to live this kind of lifestyle. When inflation changes the entire country, not just one region. All right, everything that you're seeing on the screen, and for the people who are listening to this, all of those were items that you can grow in your own backyard. The milk, if you have a cow, a sheep, a goat, you can have yourself some milk. If you have your garden, you can grow your own tomatoes, cucumbers, and that's it on that list. But also, if you have the land, you can plant the trees for your oranges, your apples. And if you have enough, if your backyard is big enough, or if you do follow the foundation principles that I give you here, you can actually have chicken coop where you can have your own chicken. All right. And the rice, it depends on where you live, because rice is kind of difficult to grow if you're not in the right area. And that would be your only expense. That's what I'm trying to say. So all of these can be grown in your own home if you take the steps right now. You won't have to worry so much about where your food is going to come from when you're able to produce it all yourself. And the things that you cannot, instead of making your bill a lot more bigger, it's just going to be the little things that you're going to need because you are supplying yourself. That is the reason why I believe it's really important that you pay attention to this information now and we look at it and we do something about it. You have to be proactive, because one of the things that has plagued, and I do dare to use that word, plagued the prepper community, is that people only tell you to stock up, as much as you can, that it's going to last you, for, 3 to 6 months. But what I tell you here is that you have to have at least 2 years worth of stocked up, food stocked up, or storable food. Because what you want to do is that if something like this happens where everything becomes expensive all of a sudden, you want to put seeds on the ground, right? And you want to grow your own food and start that cycle if you're not doing it already on a regular basis. Because there's several things that can happen if you don't already know how to do it, and your garden is not, there every year to where the soil already knows, or that your soil has, all the components that it needs. The seeds already know where they are, stuff like that. The reason that you want 2 years worth of food stocked up at home is because that is going to give you 2 growing cycles, depending on where you are in the country. Because if you're in Florida, you can grow fruit year round, right? No problem. But if you're in North Dakota, more than likely your growing season is a lot shorter. So you want to give yourself the opportunity to work with the weather, to work with everything that's going on around you, grow your own food. And if you have crop failure, whether it's summer or winter, you can rely on what you have stocked up. All right. That is the reason, and that is the scientific reason why you want to have at least 2 years worth of food. Ideally, you want more than that. The 2 years is just the bare minimum. And again, this breaks down into the 2 types of people, the people who have money and the people who don't. You can take the baby steps if you don't have money to reach the 2-year goal. You can do it into 3-month increments. You can do it, however it is that you can afford it. But you can also add seeds to it and make sure that everything is prepped. You more than likely you still have several years, and I really hope we do, because from the last major crisis that we had in the country as far as the economy is concerned, it was in 2008. So it has been plenty of time, 12, 13 years for you to prepare. So hopefully another 12, 13 years will go by before a major, what we're trying to say that is the worst economic collapse of the American society that has ever been experienced happens. So if you still have another 13 years and you're taking those baby steps, you will have plenty of time, but you have to make sure that you're diligent. All right. So let's move on to the next article that I have for you, because again, it just shows, it proves, once and, time and time again that, the world is being set up, whether on purpose or not, for the day that the global system collapses, the monetary system. Now, this article comes from goldswitzerland.com, and the title says, the 2.3 quadrillion global time bomb. And I want you to do the emphasis on global. As I warned in last week's article on Archeos and Credit Suisse, investment banks have created a time bomb with 1.5 quadrillion derivatives monster. A few years ago, the BIS, which is the Bank of International Settlements, in Bezos reduced the 1.5 quadrillion to 600 trillion with a pen stroke. But the real gross figure was still 1.5 quadrillion at the time. According to my sources, the real figure today is probably over $2 quadrillion. A major part of the outstanding derivatives are over-the-counter and hidden in off-balance sheet special purpose vehicles. Below the cube, the total central bank and investment gold is shown. This amounts to 77 tons or $4.3 trillion. That sum represents 0.2% of the total debt and liabilities of 2.3 quadrillion as shown in the time bomb. The 4.3 trillion gold value is at a gold price of $1,750 per ounce. This minuscule 2% of liabilities obviously is far too small to support global debt. A 20% gold backing of total liabilities will be minimum. That would be 100 times the current 2% or a gold price of $175,000. I am not forecasting this level or saying that this is likely to happen. All I'm doing is looking at the total risk that the world is facing and relating it to the only money that will survive. Also, measuring the gold price in dollars serves no purpose because if this scenario happens, the dollar will be worthless and the gold price measured in worthless dollars at infinity. All right, so simply what this is saying is that gold is going to be king in those days. And hopefully, if you can afford it, you have gold and silver. So this global, all right, it's not just the United States. This is a global problem. They have a time bomb where the 1.5 quadrillion dollar derivatives could collapse, and they only have 2% of gold to back it. So what they can do is just manipulate the price, rise the worth of the 1 ounce of gold, and then back it up with gold. But it's eventually going to collapse on them because this, if I'm getting the right message, this is the total global supply of gold that's available right now. So if they only have 2% for all the money spending that they've done and they have hidden, then it's not going to be enough. So people are going to be looking for other places to go. They're going to look at China. They're going to look at the EU. They're going to look at the Middle East. They're going to look at Russia. They're going to look, somewhere else that is not the United States. And once they find that place, they're going to go there. But I really do believe it's going to be China. Now, when I first looked at this article, it really, how can I say this? It really showed that the ambition that China had. The good thing is that, more news came out, and now that China has been testing its digital currency, they have really shown their hand. And it really proves once and for all to everybody around the world that cryptocurrencies can not only be manipulated, but they can also be trackable down to the second. China is able to track everybody in real time, even more efficiently now with the cryptocurrency that they made their money with. So I do think that at one point the cryptocurrencies are going to be either banned or they're going to be sucked into the system because they're very trackable. It doesn't take very much for the U.S. government to just pass a law where they say that cryptocurrencies are now, banned. The reason we're not at the point yet is because the dollar has not collapsed, or at least it's not threatening to that level yet. China is, though. And this article that I'm going to be sharing with you from Zero Hedge really points that out. And the title is China preparing a gold-backed yuan? Beijing greenlights purchases of billions in bullion. Again, that's from Zero Hedge. In 2018, the Chinese launched a gold-backed yuan-denominated oil futures contract. These contracts were priced in yuan, but convertible to gold, raising the prospects that the rise of the petro yuan could be the death blow for the dollar. 2 weeks ago, the IMF reported the global share of US dollar denominated exchange reserves dropped to 59% in the fourth quarter, according to the IMF's coffer data released today. This matched the 25-year low of 1995. And just last week, China became the first major economy to unleash a central bank digital currency, cementing its trailblazer status in virtual currencies far ahead of other countries, after already recently experimenting with large-scale trials of an actual payment by consumers, which was met with mixed results. All of which sets the stage for the dramatic headlines that hit this morning as Reuters reports that China has given domestic and international banks permission to import large amounts of gold into the country. Is this just the next stage of China seeing the writing on the wall for the US dollar as global reserve currency and paving the way for gold-backed yuan? As Alasdair MacLeod wrote last year, China can escape the fate of the dollar collapse by tying the yuan to gold. All of the major economies, China is best placed to implement a sound money solution. Simply what that is saying is that China is preparing itself to be in the position where the US dollar collapses and everybody's trying to look for a place to go to put their money. They're going to come to China. And they're going to make it, appealing to everybody by backing it with gold, because gold is a real asset. It's something tangible that you can have in your hands. So people are going to want that. They want to have the store of value there. What they're going to forget is that China can just very simply confiscate whatever they want. But the point is that they're going to be looking and they're going to find it. And again, that's where I get my thinking that once that happens and everybody abandons the dollars and all those dollars come rushing right back into the economy of the United States, that's what's going to make the hyperinflation even worse. We're going to look worse than Germany. We're going to look worse than Venezuela and other places. So one of the things that we really have to understand is why China is doing this. And yes, of course, they have the ambition of being the superpower of the world. But if it wasn't because of the United States, they would have never been able to take that step. And there's other things that we have done that I'm going to be reading this next article that really push Russia, China, and other countries to just pretty much give us the middle finger and walk away from us. Russia is just getting ready right now to be cut off from the SWIFT system. And that is one of the most powerful weapons that we have, because if we don't let them in the system, they cannot transact it, their transactions. To be in that position would be a death blow to your economy. But now Russia has, taken the back roads to where if that does happen, it's not going to affect them, because they have the relationship with China and other countries in the EU and other countries in Africa and other countries around the world where they don't have to use the US dollar as the means of exchange. Yes, the United States can threaten those other countries that if they don't do what they say, they're also going to get sanctioned. But when you really think about it, if they get pushed to that direction, they're only going to send them to the arms of China and Russia. So the United States would really have to think about the strategic, purpose in all of this. If they're really going to keep using the SWIFT system as a club to beat people in the head over with. Now, the second part of that article that I first read to you earlier, which is from tomlongo.me, the title again is From the Notebook, the Yuan, the Digital Yuan, Proof of Guns, and the Expiration of Money. The article says, there are pluses and minuses to everything about the digital yuan. From China's perspective, it gives them a currency which can easily bypass the U.S. control over the flow of U.S. dollars, while giving China much more control over capital inflows into the country and the terms under which it can come in. With tensions rising between the U.S. and the Russia-China-Iran axis, all three of these states are making profound moves to insulate themselves from aggressive dollar diplomacy. Today's announcements of new sweeping sanctions against Russia not just targeting diplomats and members of the government, but limiting access to Russia's sovereign debt greatly accelerates these tensions. Russia, for her part, has already announced plans to ban MasterCard and Visa from use there. They, like China, already have a homegrown analog to the US control SWIFT system for international payments and are as well exploring the development of a digital ruble. So everybody's taking the steps to pretty much abandon the US dollar. Once the major countries no longer pretty much give money to the stock market here and they make the Chinese stock market grow, probably more than it has here, that's going to be a death blow to the United States. The reason is because companies spend a lot of money, countries spend a lot of money in the stock market here. And the companies that do that domestically, they get a lot of money in return, right? Which, of course, that helps them fund their businesses, and that helps pay their workers. If the U.S. stock market was to suddenly disappear, there would be billions and maybe even trillions of dollars disappear, and that would make companies disappear, the ones that would not be able to take that blow. It would certainly make a lot of people unemployed, and that would just devastate the economy to where it could trigger the event to where everything collapses. So the U.S. is pretty much beating the crap out of everybody to the point where nobody wants to be around anymore. And now these countries, the major countries, have created their systems to where if other countries do sign up to them, then it's going to be a lot easier for them to work with if the United States tries to sanction them as well. You know, we saw the same thing with Venezuela and Iran. Venezuela and Iran are two countries that are sanctioned by the U.S. And, you know, they took that to be their strength. They said, okay, you know, with both sanctioned, it's not going to work, so let's work together. And they came up with a plan, right? Venezuela was going to send them all this oil to Iran. They were going to refine it, send it back, and, you know, with a bunch of other things. And that helped the Venezuelan economy. It's not good, you know, it's still hyperinflated. You still have to work a whole month for a carton of eggs. But what I'm saying is that the relationship became a reality, something that the U.S. could not stop. Even though they tried to send ships to blockade, Russia and China got involved, and the U.S. backed off. So it does work. You know, having other countries back you is going to help you in the long run if you're on the other side of the SWIFT system. So all of that eventually is going to go away. And we have to prepare for the day that that happens. So that is the reason why I give you the emphasis. You know, I'm not telling you all of this is going to happen tomorrow. I'm not saying that the inflation is going to get so bad that it's going to hurt everybody's pocket next week. What I'm saying is that eventually it's going to happen, and you have to count each and every day, and you have to use it towards your preparedness. All right. So that's what we're doing here in this community of preppers. That's what we're doing in, you know, in this local community, to where we're setting ourselves up to help other people once this happens and they don't know what to do. You know, we can supply them with the seats and with everything that they're going to need for them to have a place to go and be able to help themselves rather than just relying on another safety net. You know, once the government safety nets go, there's no more. What I'm trying to provide here is not a safety net where they just, you know, swing from. It would be giving them the tools necessary for them to take care of themselves. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing here in the next few weeks, here in the next few months, and hopefully in the coming years. But all of this can only be done with your help. So I would really appreciate it if you can get this podcast, share with your friends and family. You know, let them know that the inflation is going to get a lot worse. Even if we don't hit hyperinflation, it's really going to hurt everyone's pocket if we hang out anywhere between 10 and 49%. All right, so you have to take the steps right now to see what kind of debt you can get rid of and what surpluses you can do and what maybe side job you can get to get more money in to put towards your preparedness. So I would really encourage you to do that. All right, so before I let you go, I do want to remind you that the MMS Survival Store is still up. I'm still giving away that book for free. You can go to the MMSsurvivalstore.com and you can get the free book, and it's gonna give you kind of like an introduction to preparedness. If you don't, you know, if you're already a prepper, then you already know how to do it. But the way that the book was written, it was more like an overview. This next book that I did is getting into the details, into guiding you exactly what to do and why you're doing it, for what scenarios to do it. All right, so again, I will let you know once the audiobook is finished, the printing is finished and everything else with it. And I will make the announcement once I have a physical book here with me. So hopefully it won't take, too much longer, maybe a month or two once everything gets processed. But once everything is available, I will let you know. And I would really appreciate it if you can support this podcast by making that purchase. Again, my name is Jose Prado, and remember, always ready.
The Man-Made Survival Show.